and good afternoon. When the election season kicks off, pledges and promises are made to the electorate in the name of the manifesto. The manifesto is the crucial benchmark that we use to measure any political party's promises attainability in terms of turning all those promises into reality, turning those pledges to uplift the lives of the people. Join me, Costa, this afternoon on the national question as we interrogate the manifesto. We are privileged again on 260 this afternoon to have Build Zimbabwe Alliance President Dr. Noah Manyika. Dr. Noah Manyika, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
Today we want to interrogate the pledges that you have made to the electorate, to the Zimbabweans in particular, and how realistically these promises that are contained in your manifesto. I've been going through your manifesto. I wouldn't want to say it is bad or good, but may you just in summary tell our viewers the nitty-gritties of their policy document.
Okay, so once again, thank you so much for and you did say something that is very, very important, that promises will be made by every political party. But at the same time, I believe that any manifesto is also an indication of the due diligence that a political party has undertaken to present itself to the people. Our manifesto is actually, the introduction of that manifesto talks about the importance of building a unique social contract. As you know, from the beginning, in the past 38 years, we are a divided nation as a result of what has happened in the past 3 decades. And I think it's important for us to find each other as a people so that we can work towards determining the direction of our country and rebuilding it. And then after we talk about the unique social contract, we then go into a 10-point plan. And that 10-point plan is, I'm sure, what we're going to be discussing as we go forward. And there are 10 distinct things that we have promised. But that is not all that we're going to do. That is just the introduction. In fact, this manifesto is part of a 3-part policy platform. There are 2 parts that are still coming. One of them focuses on the war on poverty, and the other one is actually our green manifesto. So those 2 parts are still yet to come.
Okay, let's look at an assumption now. Supposedly that if we win this election, just before we delve into your manifesto, what's the earliest immediate things that you think they need to be addressed for the benefit of the Zimbabweans?
Well, the fact that you have had a change of leadership is an important thing. It's an accomplishment. The very fact that you actually have new leadership that people have voted into power, because as far as I'm concerned in Zimbabwe, we have a leadership problem. And that leadership problem is from top to bottom. It's not just in the executive. You're talking about even at council level. You need leaders who understand what their responsibilities are and who are voted into power because they can truly deliver on the promises that they make. So that's the very first thing that the Zimbabwean people themselves will have delivered. Not even the government, but the Zimbabwean people will have delivered. A new leadership which actually comes out of Zimbabweans no longer voting their fears but their hopes, and actually looking at what is being offered and making sure that they make the right decisions. And then when we come in, obviously, one of the very first commitments we have made in our manifesto is that we'll radically cut non-productive spending. So that's something that is within one's power. When you come in, you can actually determine the size of your government. And we have said that we will have no more than 15 ministers. We'll eliminate all deputy minister positions, and we'll start even having conversations about engaging others about reducing the size of the legislature, but that one is a constitutional process. And then there's some other things as well, getting rid of laws that unduly intimidate people from coming into the country to invest. Get rid of AIPA, get rid of POSA, make sure that there is an environment where people can really feel they can associate, they can invest, they can do things without being harassed by the authorities. Those are things that are also within our power. So one of the things that I'm very, very careful of is not to sit here and say, okay, this is what we're going to do in the 100 days. And then you get into office and you realize that there are things that you are not aware of because the governance culture of Zanu-PF has been opaque. Even right now, knowing what is constitutional and what is not, you have to do a lot of study and you have to find out some of the schedules that are added to laws. You look even at our own electoral act. you know, it started off as a document which was like that, and now it's that thick. So there's a lot of additions that have been made, and a lot of times when you try to access that information, you can't get it. So, you know, I really want to be very careful about promising things that when you get in there, people will then say, but you said you're going to do this in the first 100 days, and yet it's not practical to do.
Well, your belief is that reducing the cabinet's ministers, I mean, you are looking at the expenditure, by the executive expenditure by the cabinet ministers. But as I was reading your manifesto, you also mentioned about maybe having one president. You
mean vice president?
Yes, you have won the election and you have got one vice president. Where do you place the 1987 Unit Accord contents of that Unit Accord? You know, which resulted in the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo being the vice president, according to that arrangement of the 1997 Unit Accord. So when you're coming in now with the one deputy president, where do you place this 1987 Unit Accord?
You remember that that Unity Accord was signed between Zanu and ZAPU.
Okay, well.
And there's unfortunately, in the past 3 decades, there's been a confusion about what is political, what is really the area of parties and what is really the area of the state. Okay. And there's been a superimposition a lot of times of agreements that are really partisan agreements onto the state. It's not necessary. When we talk about building a unique social contract at the beginning, we are saying every Zimbabwean belongs, and every Zimbabwean can play any part. Any Zimbabwean can be the president of this country. You know, you can be Ndebele, you can be Shona, you can be Manyika, you can be Venda, whatever you are, you can actually be the president of this country. So, you know, we don't need to carry on the things that were agreed between Zanu and ZAPU into this new dispensation where every single Zimbabwean belongs. Because, you know what, if you continue with that, do you then make another dispensation for people who are not, who are white or who are Asian or who are the Manyika people? Do you do that? I don't believe you do. You actually have to create a unique social contract right from the start and make everybody feel right.
Just make our viewers receive a very clear message from you. We are looking at the Matabele disturbances. You know how gruesome they were.
Yes.
And now having a vice president supposedly from the Mashonaland or from the Zulu, how do you think when you are approaching the healing reconciliation processes, how do you think the Matabele people will receive it, especially supposedly coming from the people who they view as perpetrators of that violence that happened? How do you think they will receive such an arrangement?
That's a very, very good question and a very, very fair one. The fact that Joshua Nkomo was actually made vice president did not address the issues that happened during Kurawuli. And this tokenism that we do in Zimbabwe does not help anyone. And I can tell you, the people in Matabeleland know that. They know that that arrangement did not lead to the addressing of their problems. Neither did it stop the deindustrialization of Matabeleland. Neither did it give to the people of Matabeleland the water that they need from the Zambezi River. Neither did it actually deal with the issue that today in Lupane, we have huge gas deposits in Lupane which have not been exploited. So, you know, this whole idea that we can satisfy, the people in Matabeleland are not fools. The idea that we can just satisfy people with tokenism is unacceptable. And I think going forward, we need to deal with some of these issues, which are very, very painful for the Ndebele people in depth. One, we need to acknowledge what happened, and we need to make sure that whatever they are paying is addressed.
Let's look at the land question. I was going through your manifesto as well. And in your 10-point plan, you aim to revise the land question, if I can put it that way. How much are you satisfied with the current arrangement, or I mean with the current arrangement in terms of this land question? How much are you satisfied with it?
So, you know, the interesting thing is that sometimes fingers are pointed at the opposition party when they actually take the same stand as Zanu-PF. You know that Zanu-PF is actually committed to compensating white farmers by September. Yes. And the timing of that is actually very interesting, because what they're doing is they're saying to these people who were hurt that elect us so that in September we can actually compensate you. Look, there are egregious things that were done during the land distribution exercise, and everybody agrees with that. And not only were there injustices perpetrated on people who were bona fide Zimbabwean citizens, but we killed our economy as a result. So these are the things that need to be revisited. The whole issue of actually doing a land audit. In fact, sometimes Zanu-PF even pretends to do it. You know, the information that Mugabe has 13 farms and so on did not come from outside Zanu-PF. It came from Zanu itself. You know, in their internal conflicts and so on, they've actually revealed who is actually holding what. So it's important for us to have a land audit and find out where the land which was supposed to be given to the people who were justifiably in need of land went to. Look, we can't rewrite history here. We know there was the Land Apportionment Act and people were dispossessed of land. Yes. We know that there was the Land Tenure Act. We know that. And then we also know, though, that there was unfair practices when it came to the actual redistribution of land, and an unfortunate message sent to one sector of our community, in our community, that they are less than Zimbabweans. So yeah, we have to revisit the whole land issue. We have to figure out how to address the injustices that were perpetrated. We have to figure out how to actually raise the money to compensate the farmers that need to be compensated. And that's not going to be easy. And in fact, this is one of the things that any incoming government is going to, this is going to be the burden of coming in after the disastrous Zanu-PF rule. So all those things have to be done. And Zanu-PF agrees with that. And I think all of us also know that one of the things that happened as a result of the land redistribution exercise is that we harmed the issue of tenure. And when you actually do that, you affect a lot of things. You affect your financial sector because the land was collateral for a huge part of our economy. So we've got to do something about land tenure. We have to figure out whether we're going to restore title and things like that. And these things require the kind of level-headed conversations with everybody, but also agent attention of the government that's going to come in.
Let's leave Zanu-PF out. Let's look at the forms of agricultural activities that you see as a president when you come into power. I mean, which form of agricultural activities do you see? I mean, partitioning our country, region 1, region 2, region 3, region 4. What forms of agricultural activities do you see that the electorate should expect from you as an incoming government?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things that you can do with land use is just determine that, you know, this is what I'm going to do in that area if that area is not suitable for it. So I think, unfortunately, even if the land is suitable for it, but you've got the wrong people in that area, no matter how noble your intentions are, and you say, we want to farm you know, tobacco in this area, when people don't know how to farm tobacco, then you're in trouble. You can look at land use in areas like Matabele, which are suitable for ranching and everything, and assume that people who are there are going to be able to do ranching. But you know the expertise and the supportive services that are needed to actually do ranching. If they don't exist anymore, you're in trouble. We were in Mashingo this last weekend, and some of the cattle in the area hadn't gone to the deep for 4 years. You know, it's really critical for us to look at restoring our economy in a holistic sense. You know, the idea that, you know, yeah, we're just going to go there and we're going to reinstitute ranching, and then you realize that a lot of the ranches were actually taken and were portioned up, and you can't do it. You know, it's not an easy thing. We have to look at restoring the right kind of governance and supportive services and attracting capital into our country to invest in actually restarting even supportive services and so on, and that's not going to be easy. And then we've got to have a conversation with our people about what is appropriate to do where in terms of farming. And that, again, is not an easy conversation, but it's a necessary
participation now of the citizens. That's
yes,
what you imply.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's look at the command agriculture and the recent legalization of Mbanje. How will your government, I mean, take this one?
Yeah, well, you know what?
The legalization, you supposedly have won the election. Are you going to continue the Mbanje legalization? Are you going to continue with the command agriculture? How are you going to approach it?
My grandfather was a farmer in the Chekutu area, and he was a master farmer at that time without depending on anybody to give him seeds. And this is in the 60s and in the 70s. And this idea that in order for you to have a viable agricultural sector, government has to dole out things is actually an indication of our failure. We've got to make sure that these people can succeed. When they do, they cultivate their crops and then they go to the GMB with their maize, they've got to be paid on time so that they can go and they can buy their own seed. And it's really, really critical to do that because this idea, and it's really prevalent in most African countries, that the government has to provide everything is very, very dangerous, because then you never really create a regenerative economy. What is a regenerative economy?
Let's just understand something. You seem to be against the government providing inputs to the peasants, if I can put it that way. But let's look at remote areas like Mberengwa, where we have got very poor families who can't afford agriculture. Don't you think it's a good initiative?
No. Look, there are certain transitional things that can be done, but if that becomes the pattern, if that becomes how you do things forever, there's something wrong. And in fact, I'm glad you bring that up. Why is it that those areas, those remote areas, are so underdeveloped? We hear, Zanu-PF in its manifesto, chapter 5, I think, of its manifesto, chapter 3 or chapter 5, says, we are a party of unparalleled success. Why are those areas still, 40 years after independence, still not able to do things for themselves? We've had governors in this country, in every province, and each year we're told about how successful the tenure of those governors are. And you give me one province where a governor has actually come and given you even the budget of that province and said, this is the budget, this was the budget of the province when I came in. I grew the GDP of this province by, even 1% during my tenure. Give me one. You are not going to find one.
Fair and fine. Yeah. Zanu-PF has failed. What's your clear-cut policy in terms of addressing those needs? In the rural areas particularly, I'm interested in remote areas where it is clear that Zanu-PF has failed.
Yeah.
You as an incoming government, how are you approaching it exactly?
I'm glad that
clear-cut policy for these people to understand that Dr. Manyika is coming to give us a relief.
I'm glad that you're one of those interviewers who acknowledges that Zanu-PF has failed, because a lot of you guys who are in the press don't acknowledge it, but we have to deal with objective facts. Okay, having said that, the reason why we have these places where there is abject poverty in our country is because we have not paid equal attention to the needs of every province. We have not. And we have concentrated, we're focused on Harare, we're focused on the places that are easily reachable. But you know what? If you are going to have a strong economy in this country, you have got to focus on every single province. So it starts with developing a business resuscitation and development plan for each province. It also requires us to develop business engagement teams for that province. And when we say business engagement teams, we're talking about the province as a whole, not the capital of the province. Looking at what is needed to integrate the rural economy of that province with the economy in the capital. So that's something that's very, very important. And so it really starts with developing those plans and making sure that you can address those. One of the things that you'll find in our manifesto, which I am really, really excited about, is the idea of devolving the presidency. And I'll tell you why this is important for development. The president has to attract attention to the needs of every province. And what we say in our 10-point plan is that 1 week out of the month, a president will actually have a working residency in a province. And this is not a political thing. He's not supposed to go there to do rallies. No. He's supposed to go there to really engage the people who have developed the business resuscitation and engagement plan. He's supposed to meet with the business engagement teams. He's supposed to then, at the end of that visit, issue a state of the province address to the nation, so that the nation knows what is the state of Matabele North, right? And then when it comes next year, because this happens over 1 calendar year, the following year when it comes, we're revisiting the state of the province report from last year. What was done? And you can imagine, the moment that the president is actually resident in a province, it attracts the investors to that province. It really attracts the global community. What is this guy doing in Matabele North? That's the way that we would govern. Attract the attention of investors and everybody to every province in this country. And when you do, don't leave out the rural areas, because the plan for resuscitating the economy of the province needs to be an integrated one, not one that just focuses on.
Let's jump into the core part of the economy. We know agriculture is a fundamental part of it.
Yeah.
But let's jump into the core of it. Let's look at the cash crisis in the country, the pricing issue. How is your government prepared to tackle this? The cash crisis, the pricing, and everything which is not doing very well, the productivity, our factories, our industries. How is your government, what's the clear-cut policy from your government when you are coming in now to address these issues?
Yeah, allow me to actually, again, congratulate you on what you just said, because you said, let's look at the core of the economy. But then you left out the agriculture that we're talking about as the core.
I see it's a fundamental. I appreciate that.
I'll tell you the reason why I say that. Let me tell you the reason why I say that. The reason reason why I say that is that a lot of the things that you look at and you say, let's fix that thing. And you remember the days of economics. Right. The days of economics were, you know, let's fix the cash prices. Okay. So let's print more money. You've got to solve the fundamental issues in the economy in order for you to attract money into your financial system. But the first thing that you do actually is making sure that you have leaders that can be trusted. Have you noticed that every time a minister of finance who was considered to be good is fired, say what happened in South Africa on several occasions, the value of the rand goes down. Why?
Who are some of those?
The reason is because...
Who are some of those ministers who were for telling the truth in them? Who are some of those ministers?
Well, I don't know why they were fired. You know, some of them were fired because they didn't get along with Zuma. You know, whatever reason they were fired. The point I'm making is people trust the stewardship of good leaders. Okay. And when they trust the stewardship of good leaders, investment comes into the country. And it's the investment that comes into the country that then replenishes your reserves, your economic activity goes up, you are able to actually draw money from the bank. It's not a question of you just going there and saying, Mangunja, we need to print more money and so you can't do that. You have to solve the fundamentals of the economy. You have to send the right signals that inspire confidence, and people come into the economy and economic activity builds up. That's how you solve the
What is your take the proposition by the statement actually by the Minister of Finance, Mr. Patrick Namasa, yesterday, when he said our economy has gone 96% cashless? Do you think what is your take? Is it worth celebrating? Is it an achievement to you? And as an incoming government, are you going to perpetuate the cashless economy? Where are you standing as a government?
Yeah, so it's kind of like saying we failed to maintain our landlines, and then mobile phones took over, and therefore that's good. Well, why can't you have both landlines and mobile systems? Look, we know that the development of technology hasn't reached every part of our country, and while people can actually transact on EcoCash, it's not very convenient right across the board. We're not anti-development, and we know that where we're going, even in some of the developed economies, is towards a cashless society. We know that. But you can't celebrate your own failure to manage your finance, by saying we're going to a cashless society. That has not really solved some of the fundamental problems that we have in this country, because we were still doing everything denominated on the US dollar, which makes our exports very, very expensive, which makes it impossible for us then to really build our local industry, because we can't compete on the export market. So some of those things are things that you need to attend to. It's not celebrating the cashless society. It's what are we doing to make sure that even the value of our currency, whether it's a virtual currency or not, is actually the right value, and it is actually predicated on people trusting our stewardship of the economy.
Let's talk about industries and factories, manufacturing industries and so forth, those which are actually the fundamentals which meant to address some of the problems that the country is facing at the moment. What is your plan regarding reviving the industry? We know Blue Air used to be the industrial hub of the country. Now, you as an incoming government, how are you going to approach it, the reviving of industry? And if there is a time frame that you can give to our viewers, they are so much keen to hear from you.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is what happens when you have had this length of time of brokenness. Because some of the industries that you're talking about, the industrial processes have actually, internationally, they are no longer the same. So in order for you to revive that particular industry, in fact, the government doesn't do it. You create the conditions for people to come and invest in that particular industry, and then people make their determination about whether they want to invest or not. So, the government is not going to, some people think that you're just going to go to Zisco and you're going to turn on the furnaces, and you can't do that. You actually have to attract someone to come in and invest in that industry and revive it. So the most important thing when it comes to reviving industries is creating the right environment for international and local investors to invest in the industries that you want to revive. If you don't create that environment, if you don't provide those incentives, then you're not going to be able to revive those industries. And anyone who makes the promise that when I come into power, I'm just going to turn on the gineries in Kadoma and in Chegulu is lying to you, because that's not how it works. You've got to revive also the supply industry for that particular industry. So you and I know Kadoma used to be a cotton growing area, and the reason why a lot of those industries exist is because there was a thriving cotton farming community there, which is not there anymore. You go to Guero, the reason why Bata is situated there is because that whole area had ranches that actually supply.
No, we want to move outside the economy, the economic sector, but I need to understand something from your government. How immune is your government to corruption? You know, corruption has been the chorus since independence, if I can put it that way. You know, the Willowville scandal, the diamonds, all sorts of stories about corruption. How immune is your government to corruption?
So this is one of the reasons why you hear me encouraging the participation of Zimbabweans, active participation in selecting your leaders. And also active participation in actually offering yourselves as leaders. What happens in a dysfunctional situation is that good people start staying away from politics. And nature abhors a vacuum, somebody is going to fill it. You know, if you don't run and you are a person of integrity, and so on, somebody who is not a person of integrity is going to step in and run. So that's how you actually guarantee that you're going to have a government that is answerable to the people. It's by the citizens actually participating and the right people offering themselves for leadership. There is no government, there's no one who can say they're incorruptible. That would be a lie. The reason why you actually have checks and balances, you have to have those checks and balances. And citizens, by the way, have to exercise their power of recall. If you have a corrupt MP, if you have a corrupt councillor, recall them. If you have a corrupt president, recall them, as they have done in other places. And this is what I encourage citizens to do. Be very, very active.
Who do you think should have been recalled from the present government regarding corruption? What do you think? Yeah, who do you think should have been recalled?
You want me to name names?
Yeah, man. The
whole of Zanu-PF should have been recalled. Okay.
So what you're actually saying is a total.
Yes, a total recall, and you know we have an opportunity to do that.
Well, it's fine. Let's jump into the health sector. As I was going through your document, I was much worried. I'm not an analyst, but I failed to read where you are. You have got the plans regarding the health sector, given the fact that it is the most precarious sector. Because for you to talk about pledging economy, revival to the people, you need health people to be precise. But from your 10 points, I've skipped it. I don't know whether does it give me an assumption that it is not important to your government?
That's the reason why I said, well, actually, our manifesto is part of a 3-part platform. So the issue of housing, sanitation, health is actually contained in our document called The War on Poverty. When we look at it ourselves, you know, if the reason why we are in the situation that we are in right now is because our economy is dead. So it affects the ability of government to fulfill its obligations to other people. So we've actually developed a 3-part policy platform. And the second policy platform, which is actually about to be published, is on the war on poverty. And it actually covers health, sanitation, and housing, and things like that. So you're going to have that. We're in the process of actually finishing that document. Then the third document also is, like I said, it's on our green approach, and we actually call it the Green Manifesto. The reason why we did that, to actually have 3 policy platforms, we didn't want this document to be so big that people would not be able to access it. We wanted to also review these things in stages. Once people have digested the manifesto and kind of know the basic things that we're going to do, it makes it easier for them to understand what we are talking about when we talk about the war on poverty. One of the things that I said in our manifesto, is that we must elect people who want for the least of us what they want for themselves. So, you know, if you want the kind of health standards that you find in Singapore for yourself, you must want that for the people, and you must provide that. So you will see that in the document on the war on poverty.
Yeah, but basically, I hope we're going to have it. But let's look at your approach to health sector. I want to believe that you've been to Barenyatwa, you've been to hospital, you've been to Chitungiza, you've been to all these as an incoming president. That state of those hospitals, what's your plan, your immediate plan to those hospitals, their state?
Yeah, no, it's unacceptable. And one of the things that we're going to have to do in the interim, because obviously all of this depends on the ability of the government to build the national fiscus Because if you're not able to build the national fiscus, you can promise things, but you're not going to be able to deliver them. So in the interim period, I think it's very, very important for us to even be actively seeking partnerships for some of our hospitals and really seeking help, seeking international help, you know, when it comes to drugs and things like that. And there are things that the international community has actually made available to some countries to help them, but not permanently. One of the things that I want to discourage is the idea of us depending permanently on help that comes from outside. I think these are some things that are just stopgap measures. And if you go out there and you actually actively seek partnerships and twinning arrangements with hospitals, and then, you know, in the immediate area also improve the conditions of service for our health workers and our teachers and, you know, all the people who provide essential services. I think if you create margin for yourself by reducing the size of government, then, you know, it makes it easier for you to actually improve the conditions of service for some of these people. Remember, at the very same time that the teachers, the nurses were going on strike, the government was celebrating buying 2 airplanes from Malaysia. And you can understand the frustration of some of these health workers. They're saying, look, here I am, you know, you're buying these aeroplanes, but you can't pay me a higher salary, you can't pay me competitively. You know, that is really wrong. So some of the priorities of the Zanu-PF government, I really believe that you're going to see an immediate inflow into the national fiscus when Zanu-PF is gone, because right now, we don't know how much Zanu-PF gets from the state.
Let's look at the nurses issue. You seem to be so much in support of their move they did. But the government was saying they should have prioritized the human life. What's
a government that does not prioritize human life should not say that to nurses. It shouldn't. Okay. For 38 years, they have not prioritized human life. And, you know, this idea that a government that has neglected people, look, 70% of Zimbabweans live in abject poverty. That's not my number. That's Priska Mfumira's number. They live in abject poverty. They live without health care. They, you know, they can't access money from their own banks. And here you are, you know, you're driving around in these new cars and everything, and you dare say that these people should prioritize the lives of people. They do every day. Those nurses do that every day. The government doesn't. And I don't believe that a government...
So what do you pledge to the health workers, to the health personnel countrywide, doctors, nurses, and everybody else? What do you pledge which is different from the present government?
Well, we will prioritize the lives of people by making sure that we are not diverting resources to a patronage system and retaining people in positions where they're not doing anything at the expense of health workers, at the expense of teachers and other people who deliver essential services.
Let's continue to look at the health sector, but now more focused on the climate change, which is another thing I think is missing from the 10-point plan.
Yeah, remember we're
so what is your approach in terms of climate change? Because I was reading the UNDP 2017 report, and one of their reasons why Zimbabwe in particular is in abject poverty is because of the climate change. Yeah. So what is your approach regarding this subject, which has contributed actually to poverty levels going up?
Yeah, no, I want to remind you again that we said we're actually we're actually going to publish our green manifesto. So all of that is actually going to be in there. But I'm going to go ahead and answer that question. The details are going to be in that. But here is what I believe. There is no way you can restore agriculture productivity, particularly in the rural areas, if we are still depending on rain. You know, if you are not going to go irrigation and all of that, you are never going to be able to even feed your people. Because climate change, here's what is really terrible about what's going on now. People work hard, they cultivate their fields, anticipating that it's going to start raining in November. Then it doesn't rain in November, it rains in December. And by then, the plants are already withered. And then they start rain, and then they end up drowning in the water. So you never really get the level of productivity that you want. Okay. If you don't pay attention to that as a government, then you are undercutting your own plans. So as far as I'm concerned, there has to be a real increase in the amount of land that is irrigated even in the rural communities. And that is really a response to what is going on with climate change. And if we don't do that and invest seriously in that, we are in serious trouble. By the way, Zimbabwe has the second largest number of dams in the region after South Africa. We have 12,000 dams. Most of these dams, the irrigation systems from these dams bypass rural communities going to a commercial farm somewhere. And one of the things that we have to do is to really look at what we have in terms of our dams, and then really start looking at these communities and engaging the chiefs and the headmen and so on, so that we can actually direct some of this water to the rural communities. If we do that, we have a very good chance of actually improving seriously.
Let's look at the present environment. We want to jump again to the issue of business confidence. You seem to be so much confident that your government is going to restore business confidence in the country. How are you going to approach it? If you can share it with our viewers this afternoon.
Yeah, well, again, the important thing is removing a government that is not trusted. If you're the government that has not managed your economy well, that is a disincentive for people to invest.
So there's the issue of sanctions. They've been saying the issue of sanctions have affected them. Don't you think also they have played a role?
Look, there are things that we can manage. There are a lot of countries that have been sanctioned and they've thrived economically. And there are some things, look, a lot of the things that go on in this country have nothing to do with sanctions. When you go there and you want to register a business and it takes... No, don't put words in my mouth. Let's not play that game, okay? Here's the issue. There are things that this government has done which it did not need to do, which resulted in some of those sanctions being put. That's not us. Nobody invited this. By the way, when these sanctions were actually put in place, nobody went around there and said, sanction the Zimbabwean government. They did it to themselves. So this idea that people who are in the opposition should carry the burden of whether they support sanctions or is nonsensical. There are things that they did which they shouldn't have done, and they triggered the things that they triggered, and that's their fault. It's got nothing to do with us. What I'm saying is, a government, when it has mismanaged the economy, when it is not transparent, when what happened in Chiadzwa happened, when you have a situation like what is going on in Lupani, when you go there and you want to register a company, and you can't register a company for 2-3 weeks, when you start a business and all of a sudden all the licensing fees just keep escalating because some permanent secretary sees a way of actually making money, there's no way you can inspire the confidence of people to come and invest in that kind of country. When you have the kind of deals that we have seen with Obet, with Wicknell, with all those people who were brought before the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, there's no way you can actually encourage honest business people to come into your country and invest. Now, there's a certain type of investor who will come. You can go to every dysfunctional country, you're going to find a certain investor there. Some of those investors are investors that have the muscle to actually demand the protection from the government. And some of those investors also give a lot of money to government figures. So even right now, you hear the celebration that, the investors coming in. I don't trust a lot of the investors that are supposedly coming into this country because there is no investor who comes into a situation where there is no proven, clean, transparent leadership.
Okay.
Yeah.
You seem to have a very clear, you have talked about Wicknell Chivayo and Obed Gutu. So now let's look. But in the reading in the press, we are informed that Obed was cleared by the courts. Do you think there is something which is a misnomer in our courts which have cleared the minister? So
the minister was cleared by the courts, but refused to answer questions before the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee.
What's your understanding? Yes. The press said he was cleared by the courts from all corruption tendencies.
Okay, which press? The Herald, Sunday Mail, Chronicle, ZBC. Those are the ones.
But that's the press.
No. So you are not the press. What do you think yourself? Because here's the thing that I always say to my friends in the independent press. What's your own view? What do you think? Have you done in-depth investigation to figure out what is going on? That's what the people of Zimbabwe deserve. You guys always call yourselves the fourth estate and all that and so on. Why are you not investigating? Why don't you actually dig deep and find out what happened? Now, if you're telling me that a man under whose watch $15 billion disappeared is clean, and a man who is a government minister who used to work for customs and so on, ended up owning a bank, that man is clean. I would wonder about you, right? So why is it that the independent press, why is it that you guys don't do your own in-depth investigation instead of actually saying to me, the press say, you're quoting the official press.
You have won the election. How are you going to approach them? Chivayo and you won the election, you're the president of the country, you want to restore confidence in business. here are the corrupt people, as you mentioned. How are you going to deal with them? So I can put it in precise.
Yeah, to be precise, everyone has to be accountable. Everyone. Yeah. Anyone who stole money from the people of Zimbabwe has to account for it. They have to. Unfortunately, here's the problem. You're going to have to rebuild the police. You're going to have to rebuild their investigative capacity. You're going to have to give them courage to investigate people that they are afraid to investigate. And there hasn't been any rule of law in this country for the past 15 years. And that's a very, very difficult thing.
But we have seen the Restore Legacy, descending on corrupt ministers like Ignatius Chombo, Minister Chidakwa, Walter Mzembi.
Really?
Do you think it's an assumption from you that they haven't done enough, the Restore Legacy? We have seen them descending and they've been dragged to court.
Really? What about Obed Mpofu, who is the Minister of the Police? He is now doing the investigation of the ones that he calls corrupt because they belong to another faction. And really, I mean, that's our idea of actually restoring the rule of law in this country and fighting corruption now.
Well, let's move to the last aspect, the issue of infrastructure. The state of our roads. Yeah. I don't want to be called an opinion person of some sort, but they are bad. In every bad state, I mustn't be shy to say it.
Yes.
So how is your government now coming in? Because it's one of the fundamentals that restore actually win the confidence of those who are serious to invest in Zimbabwe. How you as a government, incoming government actually, are you going to deal with the issue of infrastructure? Yeah,
the issue of infrastructure is something that's very, very important, and we have to be very careful how we prioritize. I have no problem with people who have big dreams for our country, and I have no problem with some of the big infrastructure projects that people have talked about. But I'll tell you what my dream is for our country. My dream is that we would have the best roads linking rural communities and the national economy. Because for me, the answer to when we talk about bringing 70% of our people out of poverty, we have got to do something about resuscitating the rural economy. So our priorities as far as infrastructure is concerned would actually begin with roads that connect the rural economy with the national economy. That's very, very important for me. Now, where do you get the money to do that is the other question that comes. And again, this is where we must not lie to the Zimbabwean people. We must tell the Zimbabwean people that we have to build the national fiscus. We have to build an environment where people can actually want to come in and invest. If that doesn't happen, we won't have the money to do it. Because a lot of the infrastructure projects that you see in most developing countries, people borrow money, and then down the road, you really pay a premium for it. And you can't maintain them and so on. So we have got to build the national fiscus. But the priorities for infrastructure projects have to be informed by, as far as I'm concerned, our war on poverty. And our war on poverty is really about integrating the rural economy with the national economy. So roads, rural roads, very, very important for me. And these are the big projects as well, as long as you can fund them, and as long as there is capacity to actually utilize them. You don't want to be building highways to nowhere. You want to build a highway because there's capacity for it to actually be used. I was driving the other day going to Masvingo. That road is a death road. Even in the afternoon, there are huge trucks coming from South Africa going all the way to Zambia and it is abnormal loads on that road, and there are passengers on that road. It is a crime that up to this time, that road has not been widened. And as far as I'm concerned, that is going to be priority.
Let's look at the transportation. Are there any bullet trains that are coming?
Any what?
Bullet trains?
Are there any bullet trains that are coming
for the elections?
I know what you are asking me to do there. Here's what I will say. Okay, the priority for a Build Zimbabwe Alliance government will be, the infrastructure priority would be providing transportation, road networks, and so on for the whole country, and making sure that it is world class. That's my answer. I will answer that question again by saying the priority of the Build Zimbabwe Alliance government is to provide roads and transportation facilities for Zimbabwean people to service what we need and to make sure that we can really service a world-class.
Well, my last question now to you is this. How much confident are you that going into this election is Build Zimbabwe Alliance party alone will win the elections? And why is it that you are not joining the coalitions? We have got the PRC led by Dr. Mjuru. We have got the MDC Alliance led by Advocate Nelson Chamisa. We have got the courts led by Elton Mangoma. So why not joining any of the coalitions? Because there seems to be a belief that Zanu-PF must be taken out of power through coalitions.
I see. Okay. Well, here's what I do. I really, really respect the Zimbabwean people. Okay. And one of the first things for me that's really important is to make sure that we tell the Zimbabwean people who we are. And we focused on bringing out this manifesto so that the Zimbabwean people would tell us would know who we are. From that, we can then engage with the Zimbabwean people on a substantive basis. And the Zimbabwean people can push us in whatever direction they want us to go. This whole idea that you just sit there and you just cobble up alliances and so on, as far as I'm concerned, is really shortchanging the Zimbabwean people, because a lot of people have been focusing on that instead of focusing on bringing out their manifestos and so people can know. Also, I can't just go into a coalition when I don't know what the other parties represent. What they say at rallies is not necessarily the same as what they commit to when it comes to their manifestos. And a lot is going to happen between now and the election. We can't, I don't know what's going to happen, but right now our focus is to present to the Zimbabwean people the BZA as an alternative. And let them decide.
The period from now to the election seems to be longer. And are there any possibilities of you joining any of the coalitions?
No, you know what? We will do what is in the best interest of the Zimbabwean people. And I can't give you an answer like that right now. What I can say is that the Zimbabwean people deserve to know what we are going to do, and we deserve to canvass for their vote and trust that they will make the right decisions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Noah Manyika, the Bold Zimbabwe Alliance president. There you have heard it. That was his manifesto. Health sector, the economy, agriculture, industry, infrastructure. So much is contained in his policy document that he intends to uplift the lives of the people when you have elected him. So as far as I see, it is up to you. You have heard it, and I am sure the document will be shared to you so that you can also have an independent assessment. And if he is worth it, you give him a mandate. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Costa. Let's meet again next Thursday. The national question continues on the phase 2, interrogating the manifesto. And don't forget to like our Facebook page, 263 Chat. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at 263 Chat as well. The crew behind the camera, Mr. Joseph Munda, Tatenda, and all the rest of the team, we want to thank you so much. Until we meet next again, good day.
Follow us on Twitter at 263chat and like our Facebook page, 263chat.